Do you know of a stellar leader or an outstanding organization that deserves a proper shout-out? Nominate them for IBJ's awards. From 40 in their 40s and Women of Influence to Nonprofit and Healthcare Excellence Awards, we're celebrating rising stars, seasoned leaders, and organizations making a difference. Discover which programs are accepting nominations now at ibj.com/nominate.
This is Inside Indiana Business Radio for the afternoon of Friday, April 3rd, 2026. I'm Alex Brown. Merrillville-based Northern Indiana Public Service Company has initiated a lockout of about 1,600 members of the United Steelworkers after more than 3 months of negotiations over a new collective bargaining agreement. The utility said the lockout comes after the two sides were unable to come to a tentative agreement before an April 2nd deadline. NIPSCO said the lockout will remain in place until the union agrees to the company's last, best, and final offer. In a statement issued after the lockout began, the union called the move, quote, an aggressive escalation that threatens worker safety, undermines labor rights, and disrupts communities across northern Indiana, end quote. A long-vacant downtown Hammond building is set for redevelopment into housing and retail. Moynihan Capital plans to convert the century-old Hotel LaSalle into 28 apartments, including 1- and 2-bedroom units with at least 2 commercial tenants on the ground floor. The $4 million project will include space for a restaurant and other retail. A healthcare industry executive with nearly 3 decades of experience in medical services management has been named CEO of Indianapolis-based Marathon Health. Chris Preco succeeds co-founder Jeff Wells as chief executive of the nationwide primary care services provider. Marathon Health operates more than 700 healthcare centers in 41 states. From the number one source for Indiana business news, this is Inside Indiana Business Radio.
Thanks for listening to this IBJ Media podcast. You're probably going to remember this ad. Do you know why? Podcast advertising works. 85% of listeners recalled hearing an ad during a podcast, and 70% of podcast listeners have acted after hearing an ad. So whether you're looking to be heard across the entire IBJ Media podcast network, sponsor one of our shows, or just start with a 30-second ad, IBJ Media can help. Contact advertise at ibj.com to learn more.
One of the most photographed sports displays in the country continues to grow in popularity and size in downtown Indianapolis. Since 2015, the JW Marriott Hotel has served as a backdrop for major sporting and entertainment events, including the NCAA Men's Final Four, which takes place this weekend at Lucas Oil Stadium. The company behind the living March Madness scoreboard is Indianapolis-based Sport Graphics, which was established 40 years ago. Owner Frank Hancock.
The largest bracket ever was the 16. And this is 20,000 square feet bigger than that one. So I'm sure we still hold the record. But it's another thing on that is, like I said, it's 60,000 square feet. That's 12 full-size basketball courts if you lay them on the ground. It's not ever going to turn into a billboard. The city doesn't want a bunch of advertising. The stuff's all tied to events. But when you're in a town with the Pacers and the Colts and the Fever and the NCAA, there's always an event.
We'll have more from Hancock on this weekend's edition of Inside Indiana Business Television. Any expectations of a quick decision on whether the Chicago Bears will pick an Indiana site for their new stadium have been cast aside. While Indiana lawmakers pushed through a financing plan for a Hammond Stadium location before the session ended in February, the Bears are still talking with Illinois officials about a deal to stay on that side of the state line. Bears President Kevin Warren indicated this week that the team will give Illinois legislators more time to complete their counteroffer, and he is confident that a decision will be made by this summer. Agronovis Indiana has released new research outlining major challenges in the state's ag bioscience sector, setting the stage for its 2026 Velocity Accelerator program and opening applications for entrepreneurs. The study, conducted by Washington, D.C.-based AeroPoint Labs, outlines specific challenges within the areas of bioinnovation, farmer-focused innovation, and food as health. Agronovis CEO Christy Wright said the research was shaped by input from across the industry.
AeroPoint talked with customers within the sector to make sure that the problem statements are, refined and are going to be very helpful to founders and innovators. And so I'm really excited to share it.
Study findings will guide the 6-month Velocity Accelerator, which offers 3 $25,000 prizes to participants developing technology-driven solutions. Marion County Public Health Department Director Dr. Virginia Kane is this week's guest on the Business and Beyond podcast with Gary Dick, presented by PNC, a weekly conversation with high-profile Hoosiers in business, sports, and entertainment, and beyond. Available now on the IBJ Media app or your favorite podcast provider. I'm Alex Brown for Inside Indiana Business Radio on Demand.
From broadcast to podcast, Inside Indiana Business with Gary Dick is now available anytime on YouTube or in your podcast feed. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcast or at ibjpodcast.com.
The IBJ Media Podcast Network is the soundtrack of a growing state. Indiana is on the move, and you can hear it happening on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. We bring you the voices at the center of our economy, our courts, our companies, and our communities. Subscribe now and be part of the conversation that's building Indiana's future. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcasts.com.